Welcome to Living Well with MS. This podcast comes to you from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, which helps people live a full and healthy life through the Overcoming MS program. We interview a range of experts and people with multiple sclerosis. Please remember, all opinions expressed are their own. Don't forget to subscribe to Living Well with MS on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And now, let's meet our guest.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Living Well with MS podcast, and joining me on this edition is Roxy Murray, or Roxy is also known as the multiple sclerosis fashionista. She is a podcaster, MS advocate, a fashionista who advocates for the visibility of people of colour to be included in the MS narrative. So, could you start off with, Roxy, tell us a bit about yourself and your MS journey?
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks for having me today. Obviously, as you said, my name is Roxy Murray and I go as a multiple sclerosis fashionista also. I'm a disability rights and MS activist that obviously goes on the narrative of gaining visibility for people of colour and queer people in the MS narrative, which includes medical studies and the creation of drugs. I use fashion as a tool for activism. And my hashtag is We Are Not Invisible, because obviously MS is an invisible illness, but I feel like we should make ourselves visible, and in visibility we can create change and also connect to each other. My diagnosis with MS started when I was 18. When I was 18, I presented with double vision and blindness in my right eye, and I was rushed to the hospital. After a series of tests and stuff, they didn't believe at that moment I had MS. They thought I had lupus. And that was based on my skin tone. Anyways, fast forward 8 years, I'd been living on and off without help and stuff, and I was dealing with no drugs, and I thought I had lupus, and I had to deal with a lifestyle of no one kind of taking care of me. 8 years later, I had a massive relapse where I couldn't really walk, and my face had dropped and stuff. And I had to go to a hospital, and I had to get, it was a hospital in Kent actually, funny enough, and I was at a friend's house, and I'd had a relapse. When that happened, they'd rushed me into the hospital, and they'd done a series of tests. She was like to me, I don't think you have lupus, I think you have something called MS. Obviously at that time, I didn't know what MS was. Who knows what MS is until you get MS, right? And ultimately, they were like, if you trust me, because basically when I got lupus, they said I had benign incredible hypertension. If anyone doesn't know what benign incredible hypertension is, it's the spinal fluid in your spine raising too quickly into your brain and creating pressure, which meant that I got what they call, and I know you probably know this, therapeutic lumbar punctures. And if you've had a lumbar puncture, there is literally nothing therapeutic about it. It is like the worst thing I've ever had to get done. I hated it, but for me, I was getting them every 6 weeks. By then, I was like, I cannot deal with another lumbar puncture. Like, literally, even the thought made me want to cry. But she was like, if you believe in me, and I will do this, and I will sedate you, which is the first time anyone's ever told me can be sedated with a lumbar puncture, I promise you, I will test your spinal fluid. Now, I didn't know that was even a thing, and for all those lumbar punctures that I had, no one had ever done it. So basically, a week later, she was like, I can absolutely confirm that you have multiple sclerosis. And that was where my life changed. So that was the difference between being 18 and 24. And that was like, over that time, I'd just been living in the universe just with lupus. And yeah, so I didn't get any drugs or anything for all those years, and it affected my mobility. As you can see, that I have range of mobility aids, and it affected like my mental health a bit, because obviously you can imagine you're living through life with all these changes inside you. I was 18, I thought I was going to be flying around the world, doing university, being amazing, like all my friends traveling the universe. Instead, I was in hospital beds. And that's what started off my activism, because I realised that ultimately there was no real knowledge behind MS and people of colour. And I didn't know why that was, but obviously I realised that had affected my own journey.
And so the fashion side of it, what is accessible fashion? So how does a brand and what does that mean to you?
So accessible fashion, for me, how I would describe it, is fashion that's easily accessible for everyone, that is adaptable to most bodies. So that means if you're in a wheelchair, it's fashion that's acceptable and works well for you while sitting in a wheelchair. So that might mean adjustable pant seams. So if you sit down in a chair, your pants slightly go up. And ultimately, if you're always sitting in a chair, maybe you need trousers that have a longer seam line so that you look as chic as you want to feel in a wheelchair. That can also be the ease of dress. So this dress for me is easy because I can just literally slip it over my head. Sometimes that might be an adaptable sleeve. It might be a magnetic fastenings. Jewelry's a big one where, like, for me, I find it really hard to clip in the little clips and jewelry and around the neck and stuff. And you can get ones that are just magnetic, so it's easier to pull on and push off for someone that wants to be chic and fashionable and look good, but they want to be able to dress themselves. Obviously, we can all get carers, we have helpers, we have family members that will help us, but sometimes you want a little bit of independence, and adaptable fashion allows you to have that. One of my favourite adaptable fashion brands at the moment is created by a lady called Victoria Jenkins, and her brand is called Unhidden Fashion, and she creates adaptable fashion for people of all ages. She's currently got a collaboration with Paw Patrol. So if you have a kid, you'll know Paw Patrol.
Well, I've heard Paw Patrol, yeah.
Yeah, right. And I love Paw Patrol. I think it's so cute. But she's got like this whole adaptable fashion range she's doing with them. And then she's also collaborating with Lucy and Yak, who do the really cool dungarees that everyone wears. And she's making them adaptable so that it suits everybody, every shape, every person's needs. And I think adaptable fashion, from my perspective, is a massive industry. Although it's a new industry, I think it's something that's really needed, and it can benefit everyone. You might not be disabled, but as we get older, the ease of, chic ease of fashion is optimal for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, what you're saying, getting older, the traditional thing is that once you hit mid 40s or 50s, then you don't do fashion anymore and you need to be putting on your slacks and slippers.
Wow.
But actually, then people are going to get accessibility. I mean, like, I've got elder family members. They don't have a condition as such, other than the fact that they're old.
Yeah.
And they have the same accessibility requirements as me. So, yeah.
And who doesn't want to be fashionable while you age? It's like, I know I do. I mean, I know you know me, but I definitely want to grow older and still look fabulous. I don't want to have to compromise my personality and my style just because maybe my dexterity and my body's movement is changing, whether that's my mobility or whether that's just my personal movement in what I can do. And I still want, like I said, a bit of privacy and ability to love and dress myself.
Yeah. But you look at how the Queen looked right up until, she was she 94, I think, when she died, and but she was like, she was wearing a Philip Treacy hat, and like she was properly, looking good until the end.
That's how we all want to go out.
Yeah. We want to go out incredibly wealthy at the age of 94
and fully chic.
Yeah, and I think it might downplay the funeral a little bit, though, maybe just a little bit. So I've seen that you've got a cool mobility bike and also some really good-looking walking sticks and canes. So, firstly, what's your walking bike to start off with?
My walking bike is a beautiful yellow number. It's called an Alinka walking bike. It was created by an amazing lady in Canada. And basically what it is, it's an alternative to a wheelchair. So a lot of us can walk, but not for a long time. And we need to sit down quite often. So this walking bike is a bike essentially without pedals. So you can constantly sit down, but you can keep movement in your body and walk. And by taking small steps, and it allows you to go longer and faster. I love it for like a good museum trip. Like museums are huge, or Disneyland is so optimal for that, where you don't really want to be in on a mobility scooter or what they call in America a rascal. And you also want to keep mobility. So obviously we all know that exercise is optimal with MS, even if it's light exercise. So it allows you to just keep walking while you can, or while you remain mobility. I love it. It allows you to be upright, so I'm not sitting in a wheelchair. I'm eye height with everyone that I meet. And it's a real good conversation starter because it's beautiful. No one really knows what it is. And whether someone has a disability or not, when they meet them, they often go, well, can I get one? Because I love this. And I think it's really cool. So it's a really nice conversation starter. And then you kind of tell people a bit more about it. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's really cool. Bright yellow. Yellow's a very positive, beautiful colour to have as well. So,
and it's a trike as well, isn't it? So it's stable because it's not 2 wheels, it's 3. So you've got that. It's not going to fall over on its own.
No, it's absolutely great. And you can add a basket at the front if you're like me and you like to shop. And they have them in a few museums around London as well. But you can go into any shop. It doesn't take up any more space than a normal wheelchair either. So there's no reason to be denied entry to anywhere. It's very easily movable. And you can pack it away. You can pop the wheels off very easily. And you can literally fold it in half. It's very secure and it's easily travelled with. So it's a really nice piece of kit.
It's another. I have a lot of different kit. It's one of those things that I'm really tempted by. I definitely want to try because the UK dealers. You might be on the South Coast. Top of my head.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly not near me at all. So I'm like, if I'm ever nearby, I'm definitely going to give one a try because when I have a mobility scooter, but then I feel if I use that too much, then I'm not doing any activity. And so that's a one-way path to using it all the time in my mind. So I want to keep active because I can walk, but I just can't walk that far. So therefore I end up using a mobility scooter because if I've got to walk 2 miles, then I'll take the scooter out. But actually there's another alternative. I mean, I have a trike as well that I go out on. So I have like an e-trike that I can take on the beach and stuff, and that's fantastic. But again, that's huge, and I couldn't take it to shops. So there's but yeah, there are a lot of devices, but yeah, there are different things for different uses. So that's one of the ones that's on my list of things.
I definitely think, like you just said, we need different things for different uses, and ultimately we need to have a range of mobility aids to get around because not one size fits all. And ultimately, like you said, I really want to see what that trike's like. So do send me a picture after because that sounds amazing.
Yeah, my e-trike. Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah.
To get round a beach because that's like
it has huge thing. Yeah, it has huge fat wheels. I won't reveal it's behind this camera. It's got huge great big fat wheels so you can use it on sand and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, Alinker is ALINKER. We're not sponsored or anything, but yeah, check them out. They're good. I've seen them, so they're yeah. So you effectively if you got, I think you can put one foot up, can't you? So if you just got one leg that you can use well, that works with that, and you can. Yeah, so it keeps you active and keeps you stable, and you can sit on it.
Yeah, like you said, I am a right leg pusher all the way. I never use both of my legs, and it's so good for that to relax because I don't know, most people with MS that I speak to always say to me that their left leg is weaker, and I just
I am. Why is that? I wonder if someone needs to look into that.
Yeah, it's always
I'm big time. All my left side. Yeah, no, like my left hand, my left arm, my left leg are the problem. My right side is absolutely fine.
Yeah, same. If I do yoga, I can literally see the difference. Like, I cannot hold my body weight up on one side, but on my right side, I'm so strong. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, that is weird. A lot of people I've spoken to, it's left side.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to get Gavin Giovanni to look into this.
Definitely.
So, as well as that, you've been an extra in a show about the history of disability rights in the UK. So, well, firstly, tell us a bit about the show, and secondly, a bit about the history of disability in the UK, or disability rights in the UK.
So, the show is called Then Barbara Met Alan, and it was done by Jack Thorne, who's actually changing overall the industry, the TV industry and the film industry, and how it works with disabled people and how it has disabled actors and stuff, and just to make TV in general more accessible. So even from this show, it's created like a journey of accessibility and a very much more beautiful industry where everyone feels more connected, it's more inclusive, it's more accessible, and people that are disabled are being allowed to tell their own stories, which is really special. this was about Barbara met Alan. So it's a story of when Barbara met Alan, and together, after the disability rights generation movement in America, it came over here. They were looking for their own accessibility revolution. They couldn't get on the bus. They couldn't do the simple things that everyone else could do. So they thought, in true punk British style, we're going to change it. And they started creating t-shirts that said piss on pity. They started chaining themselves to buses. They started going out on the streets and asking for the change that they deserve. It was a big revolution. It took a lot of people. There's too many people to name. Even my MS brain can't even remember everyone's name. But these people are the reason why today we have rights. And we still have a lot of work to do. We really do. But it was a very special moment to be a part of that. For me personally, to learn that these people's stories, the stories of like literally about 10 people that came together to create this revolution, to meet the real Barbara, which was just insanely iconic, where you see someone, you can have a conversation with them and be like, because of you, I can get on the bus with ease. Because of you, people care about basically my rights. And because of you, I have a voice. Because disabled people didn't have voices. No one cared. People were horrible sometimes and were like, well, why do you need to get around? You're disabled, shouldn't you just stay at home? Or, what do you want? Do you not just want us, like, it was all those kind of, telethons where it was like, oh, really sorry for disabled people. Look at them, all there. Like very inspiration porn, as people will call it. Make sure you ring up and give a few pounds to make sure they have a better life. But we didn't want that. They didn't want that. They wanted real change. They wanted real rights. And it's just about the story of how that changed. It's now been actually put on Netflix. So if no matter where you are in the world, you can watch the story. It's a better story than I could ever explain on a podcast. And it's really special to have been a part of putting that out into the universe, and just to be on the most accessible shoot I've ever seen in my life, with literally about 50 to 60 disabled actors at any one time on any day. Amazing staff. We were fully catered for. We were fully heard. Any accessibility needs we had were catered for too. And we got to tell our own stories, and we got to feel a part of something that was truly amazing.
Wow, I think one thing that I've had a little bit of, not involvement with, but there's a show called Sex Education in the UK that you'll be aware of. I think that is on Netflix, so it will be international as well, I'm pretty sure. But they had a character in the latest series who's got MS. Very briefly, he's like the parent of one of the main characters, and they went out for auditions. I did a sort of show reel for them. So I got a little way down the process, but then they didn't come back to me. But they wanted people with MS to play the guy with it. They didn't need to have MS because he only had a few lines. So really, it could have been done by anyone. But their policy is no. If it's someone with MS, then we want an actor with MS. And so all the people in it are typically representative of whatever that may be. Whether that person's gay, there would normally be a gay actor. If that person's the character's got MS, then the actor has MS. So that you just think, whereas not that long ago they wouldn't have done that. And you do get these great iconic performances by some actors, and you go, "That's amazing." They've portrayed someone with motor neuron disease really accurately, but then it sort of moved on from there, and now they're actually saying, "Well, why don't we use someone with motor neuron disease to do it?" Or and that was their policy, and that was like quite interesting. Because they just said, "Oh yeah, the reason we're asking you guys is we want someone with MS to play the person with MS."
I love that, because the hashtag for the show that I was in is nothing about us without us. So it's like the belief that, like you just said, like, who can tell a better MS story than someone with MS? There's no way. Like, doctors, you study it, but you haven't got MS. Friends and family, they love us and they care for us, but they don't have MS. It takes our voice to really get across the nuance of what this disease, or any disease or illness is.
You're not going to get it wrong, are you? If you've got it, you're not going to muck up. No. So another thing that has come up, the Adams study. What's the Adams study in the UK?
Okay. So the Adams study is a study by an amazing guy called Ben Jacobs. And it's the first study in the UK that actually assesses the genetic DNA of people of colour in relation to MS. So I'm not sure if everyone knows, but there's not many MS drugs that would have been created with all genetic profiles in mind. And he's starting to gather the data and assess the data so we can understand like how MS manifests in someone of colour. So for me, like if I go back to my story, most people present lesions in their brain, or that's what we're told. For me, it was in my spinal cord. It took a while for people to understand that. But it's like, well, why does it start in your spinal cord versus in your brain, and how does that manifest in your body, and so forth? So he's doing a series of tests which are just literally saliva samples. So if you are of an ethnic diverse background, really do sign up. It's an amazing study. It literally just takes you spitting in a jar, and it could change the trajectory of MS, because ultimately we have like things that tell us, EBVs are ways to get MS, and sometimes it can be depression, and there's many triggers that can cause MS, but we don't know how it manifests in people of colour, or if we get that data, how it could actually help us get closer to the cure. So it's a really amazing study. It's very new. We've got about 400 people, I think, signed up now, but we're starting to analyse the samples. And as we go forth, we will get closer to the cure, but we'll also get closer to creating more drugs that are more optimal for everyone's bodies and everyone's genetic DNA in mind. So yeah, I'm so proud to be on that study.
Have you come across Mitzi Joy Williams?
Yes, so I met her this year in July at
She came
the
over,
MS
didn't she? Yeah.
Yeah, and she is just incredible. Honestly, the coolest person I've met. Like, I was literally like, it's like I met Madonna. I was just like, I love this person. I think they're amazing, because they've been pushing those boundaries, and they're part of that American revolution, because obviously America has the data, but it's hard to share it across channels. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, they have because she's been a podcast guest already. But everyone in the American military have basically given the rights to their full medical records while they're in the military. So they know all those people, and the ones, there's like millions of people. And so they've got all that data. So they've got vast amounts of data. And so they've got all sorts of things they can do. Like people who've got MS and they can just say, okay, let's have a look at how it's affected your family's income, or what racial background you are, or how far north you were born, or so you've got a big place with vast amounts of data. So Americans have loads and loads of data. They just have to be able to trawl through it, I think. It's a lot of it's come through that military side, because they basically, if you're in the UK, I don't think you sort of have given the government all these rights, but in America, that's just it. You sign up, you basically say they can do whatever you want with all their medical data, so they can then trawl through it, which is good. Other things. Your work includes elevating the patient experience. So on the other side of it, though, sort of personally, how could we be our own best advocate when we interact with the doctors and the medical team? Because there's definitely, there's a sort of, it would be extraordinarily rare for your neurologist or your MS nurse to have MS. So there's definitely a slight disconnect. But how do you find that? How can you be your best advocate when dealing with your MS team?
So I learned this from another MSer. So I, had my own journey, and it was a tough journey. And I realised that I didn't really always understand what they were saying, or what the medical jargon was. And I always felt like when I went to a doctor's surgery or a hospital appointment, I was so overwhelmed with just having MS and having that internal feeling. So sometimes MS can be like a full body emotion as well as the feeling, that I realised I kind of go in. And have you ever watched like a movie where you can hear voices and things are happening, but you're not really fully present? I was like realising that I was just doing that. As every few months I'd go in, they'd be like, "Are you alive? Are you taking this drug?" "Yes." And then they'd push you back out the door, and I'd be like, "Oh my God." And it was really affecting my mental health. And I was like, what do I do? So I started off with learning what MS really was and the options. So like we spoke earlier about like diets and mindfulness, and I kind of lean towards everything that a lot of people are like, oh, don't look at that. Like, that's not, oh, I don't believe that's like what causes MS. But I want to know, I want to like make my own personal judgment, because MS is not the same for everyone. That's the first step. And two, I started to lead into my body. So when you get an MS diagnosis, it's not the happiest time in your life. You're not like, oh my God, yippee, I've got MS. You're probably like, oh, okay, MS. Then they tell you it's uncurable. So you're like, well, if it's incurable, what can I do? And you can feel depressed, and you can feel a bit like, oh, I don't know. Because they don't give you a toolbook. They don't go, here's, you have MS and here's all the information possible. Make your decisions. You mainly get like a list of drugs, like a menu of different drugs you can take, what the side effects, and you decide on that. But I didn't want to live like that. Like, I realised I needed to make a change for my mental health and my physical health. So after speaking to, do you know Dominic, who's on the MS Guide? I spoke to him, and he was like, write down everything, ask questions. And I had to become fearless. And I know when you start an MS diagnosis, you are kind of fearful and you don't really know what's going on. So I had to be like, lean into my body side, be like, oh, my left leg was roaming. But my cognitive function, I don't know about yours, is not great. So I realised, like, I would have all these amazing conversations with, say, you or a friend or a family member, and I could list everything off. But as soon as I got into the appointment, I forgot everything. So I started keeping a diary.
Yeah, I think going into a neurologist appointment with a list is the best advice.
Because it's how you start advocacy, right? Having a list of things so you never forget.
Yeah, I do all the time. I go in there thinking I need to talk about. I mean, I've got an appointment coming up in a month's time, and I'm starting to sort of note down things, because otherwise, you're right, I'll forget. I mean, it probably, I don't know, it's an MS thing, or because I'm 51 or something, but you start to forget things, and so I'm just a constant list maker now. I have notepads always by me with work and stuff. I never look back through them. Very rarely. The act of noting it down, actually, for me, is much as anything. That's the thing. If I write a list, I mostly actually remember the stuff on the list without even looking back at it. But if I don't make that list, then I
bring the list with me, and sometimes forget the list. So I will say to people, list and paper, list in your phone notes.
Yeah, no, I do it on my phone. I have it on my phone, which syncs to my computer, which and I write on bits of paper as well.
Because you will forget. Sometimes I tell someone else. Sometimes, depending on what emotional situation you're in, you might be super emotional. Maybe you need someone to come with you. Sometimes it's good to have someone to come with you as well that can ask questions that maybe you're not in the right space to ask. But also ask questions that are not asking you. So for me, I'm a massive advocate for MS and sex. I believe we're disabled or we have an illness. That's great. And keeping us alive is optimal. We appreciate that. However, I also want to live. So, you want to skydive, you want to surf, you want to do what you want, but maybe you want pleasure. So I'm the kind of person that I will go now, which I wasn't at the start, when I'd be like, so how do I make this better? How do I change my bladder so that if I'm, getting intimate with someone, that's not an issue? And I ask the neurologist questions, and sometimes they make me red in the face, and sometimes I make them red in the face. But I've realised that I have to ask them to advocate for myself and advocate for the best life I can have. And that includes all remits of what my pleasure is, what my life is, and what my lifestyle is.
So how do you go about destigmatizing disabled sex or adaptive sex, or however you want to put it?
By being the poster person for it. I can't expect you to do something that I'm not going to do myself. So I will be loud and I will be proud and I will create space so people come behind me and feel less of that nervousness, less of the embarrassment. I've been part of a lot of studies. There's a studies that I've been part with King's Hospital, which is the creation of a self-therapy kind of thing to help people work through sexual difficulties, specifically for MS. I speak to a lot of pelvic health doctors in relation to MS-specific health and physiotherapy. So, because I know that we need targeted structures, but they're not necessarily in NHS overall. So I'm working to help build those things where behind the scenes that no one sees. But in front of the scenes, I'm like a 34-year-old unapologetic Aries. I'm going to stand up, be proud. I'm going to look fabulous. I've literally walked a runway at a fetish show and with a mobility aid and was like, I'm going to wear underwear and be fabulous and show people we can be disabled and be sexual and be good and curious and gorgeous And it's okay. We shouldn't feel like what everyone does to us is they desexualize us. They make it so that we shouldn't feel like we deserve space. And that's why when you said about sex education as a program, it's so important, because that program is pushing boundaries that even my voice would never get to. And it's showing disabled people that, you know, we're okay. We're worthy of space and visuals and time. And I love programs like that because it does what I can't do. But in the time, I still make sure that, you know, if like I can't say go outside and do these things if I'm not going to show you I'm doing them first, and I make myself visible in my invisible illness.
That show, the most visibly disabled person is not a very nice character, and that came up to someone. They said, "Oh, it's a shame because he's not actually that nice." And you said, "No, that is, you shouldn't have to like someone because they're in a wheelchair, though. Actually, it shouldn't have to be. He shouldn't have to be the nice character in a wheelchair. The fact the guy's not a nice character. There are bits of it where he's some episodes. We're not going to go through the whole lot, but yeah, the gist of it is most of the episodes he's not actually that nice, and so he shouldn't have to be. Just because he's in a wheelchair, you don't have to be. And that was sort of like it's a shame he wasn't nice. Like, no, there are nice people. There are not nice people. That's unrelated to the fact that the guy uses a wheelchair. He should be able to be whatever. It's just, he could be a neo-Nazi in a wheelchair, or he could be a saint in a wheelchair. Those things are unrelated to the wheelchair bit of it, and it actually kind of works. So.
Well, that's the thing about disability. I think people forget that disability can affect anyone at any time. So, and we can't always, that's why I love the top piss on pity, because it's like you really, most people want to feel pity or emotion, like, oh, poor you're in a wheelchair. And then when someone's like mean or like, well, leave me alone, people kind of go, oh, actually, that's not what I want to feel as an able-bodied person. But it's not about what you want to feel. It's about their real, authentic self, warts and all. It doesn't matter. Like, let them be who they are. And I love when people portray that in a way to show that, not everyone's nice because they're disabled.
And on the last thing about the sex thing, so is there sort of adaptive stuff for sex as well? Is that something that's coming around?
So many. And they already exist, which is what people are like, oh, you speak about adaptable sex toys, and I'm like, they've existed for a long time. There's some new ones coming to market, which are hands-free. But for a long time, you've had wedges, so that if you've got back pain or you can't get into the right position, you have wedges you can put on your bed to do that. Bondage, even though people are like, oh, bondage, there's so many adaptable things in bondage kit that you can use to help you elevate your sex as a disabled person. But it takes not being shy and a bit of a build up. There's a lot of toys that I talk to people and teach people to use that help bring sensation back, because we can lose sensation with MS, or we can have too much sensation, which is a whole other problem, where it's too intense and you just want to go in the corner and be like, stop touching me. That's an issue. But they're all there, but no one highlights them as adaptable tech. So that's the issue. So I work with other people in America. I do a lot of interviews on magazines and stuff, and I talk about things and tips and tricks that people can use because it's already there. And a good brand is called Octopus, and they create really good bullets and hands-free kit. And there's a lot of things for men as well. So people think sex toys are all for women, and that's great. And yeah, we do have loads, but there's a lot for men too that are needed, and they can create a lot of pleasure for them. And that's probably what my next highlight should be, is more what guys can use to help pleasure themselves or help to feel more intimate, because it is
Aaron Boster talks about that actually on some of his videos. He sort of goes into, because you need to increase the stimulation and using wands and things like that. But he talks about men and women. He's saying
it's about the nerve ending.
Yeah, right? Exactly. We want nerving.
Yeah.
If you hear a noise in the background, by the way, that's my robot lawnmower, which is anyone who has a lawn and that's an adaptive aid that's absolutely brilliant. I would recommend it. I've got a perfectly cut lawn, which I don't have to do anything with. It just goes and does its thing. It trundles around every evening and cuts my lawn.
That is amazing. That is actually incredible.
Because I can't mow the lawn. It's just great. Yeah, great thing. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit off topic. We just see, but there's a noise in the background. It's my robot lawnmower trundling around.
You'll be surprised how many people put comments now being like, "Can you send me the link to the robot lawnmower?"
It's great. They're not that expensive. Brilliant. What about? So we talked about sort of sex and things. So assuming I've come across a couple of people who are in MS relationships with two people with MS with each other, but that's very, very rare. So let's say most people, their partner is going to be someone who doesn't have MS. So how would you go about talking about embarrassing MS symptoms, which might be like bladder control, might be sexuals? How would you start those conversations with a
I
partner?
get asked this question a lot, and for me, it's different because I have been in a relationship for like 14 years. So my partner transitioned from my lupus diagnosis to my MS diagnosis with me. So they saw like everything. Like I'd had the worst times. I'd gone on public transport, passed out, and wet myself. Like they've seen me in so many situations. It's hard to even be embarrassed anymore because like what am I being embarrassed about? You've literally seen everything. So for me, it's been okay. But a lot of people ask me, like, I'm dating, I'm on Tinder, I'm on Grindr, I'm trying to connect with someone new. When do I speak about this? What do I do? And I'm a believer, like some people like, I don't think I'm my MS diagnosis first, which I agree. You're not just MS, you are definitely a human outside MS. But I'm a believer that at least by like the second, third date, I'd want to let you know because I don't want to be with someone that doesn't want to be with me.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's never going to be the easiest conversation to have, like, hi, I have MS. Because, like I said, some people are like, what's MS? And other people might be like, well, I don't know. But I think they're missing out because I don't think I think MS people are amazing. And probably sounds biased, but I genuinely love this community. I think there are some amazing people and they've really brought out my own independence as well. But also, like I've said to a lot of people, because I used to do you know who Myelin and Melanin are?
Well, I was going to ask you about that actually. We'll come on to that. Well, we'll talk about it now as well because I was going to say is that your podcast or you're involved with that podcast?
It was their podcast. So they have these parts and those parts, and the four of us, I think it was those parts we did together, which was just a series of 4 black women talking about sex. And some people, like some of the things that we find embarrassing, like wetting yourself, for someone else it's a kink. And someone else is going to pay thousands of pounds for that exact thing. And it's about getting the balance and understanding yourself, what you're okay with, who you are, and what you're okay with. And then translating that to another human. If someone doesn't want you because you have MS, that's not on them. I mean, that's not on you, that's on them.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, you can only be who you are. There's always going to be someone for you. I don't know what it is like to be in a relationship with 2 people with MS. That's a special situation. And I love listening to those podcasts because a lot of them do podcasts. But I just think you can only be yourself and only be honest. I think we're such amazing people outside of MS. We are fully talented, by the way. If I speak to people about MS and go, what do you do? And they tell me what they do, I'm always like, that's amazing. Then the problem is how people perceive disability. It's never going to be with you. It's how the media has portrayed disability, how we're not visually seen enough. And obviously, like I said before, the desexualization of people that are disabled. I don't know why that is. That's just something that makes other people feel comfortable. So I'm glad that we're changing that narrative because it shows people that actually we can still maintain independence with adaptable tech and stuff. We are still absolutely gorgeous, no matter what anyone wants to think. We can still be highly sexual beings. MS is not a death sentence. It doesn't mean because we have MS we're going to die. Yes, there's going to be hard times and good times, but that's life in general, regardless if you're able-bodied or disabled. It doesn't matter. So I just think being honest and upfront at the start is always a good idea. Just for yourself. I don't want to get attached to someone and in 6 months are like, oh God, you've got MS. So, okay, I don't want to do that because what about my emotions?
Yeah, you're wasting your time, aren't you? It's like,
yeah,
I
don't want to do that.
So, and all these things are in the show notes, right? So, like Myelin and Melanin, we'll link to everything like that in the show notes. So, do check them out. But another thing which we'll also link to is the Stop MS campaign for the MS Society in the UK. So, just a final thing, could you tell us a bit about your experience, the campaign goals of the Stop MS campaign?
So, MS Must Stop is a campaign that we all did together. I'm really proud of this campaign because I think it's the most diverse campaign that we've done. I also think it's the first campaign where it wasn't about pity or feeling sad for someone with MS. it was about action. It was like, it needs to stop. And it was about us explaining like what it means to us, what MS is, why it must stop, and also how close we are to stopping it. And that we just need this little bits of push so we can really get to a place where we can stop MS. We are further in our medical studies and understanding of MS than we've ever been. People are living way better lives than ever. And this is what it's about. It's about gaining, I think it's £20 million to help fund the last few steps of stopping MS. And it was just a series of people. You had like the iconic sitting bull, which is Dave Walsh, who's the world's strongest man, who's just actually the funniest, most credible person. You had Yazzie, who's just amazing. You had Natalie, you had Amy from MS Together, you had Nick, who just literally ran a marathon, and then you had me. And we're all different, but the common factor for us is that we all have MS. We had a chance to have amazing conversations, but also to express what MS means to us and show you that MS is not something that you will see. You can't go, well, that person has MS, because you wouldn't see it on any of us. If we were just sitting there having a conversation, you wouldn't, well, how that person's disabled, you wouldn't know. But we need to stop it for many reasons. And I don't know, I felt like it was the best MS Society, MS-based campaign I've ever seen, personally, for many reasons. But like I said, the main one was that it was more of a celebratory campaign. Let's celebrate the MS community, but let's also help them stop MS so that we can live a better life and stop anyone else feeling the emotions and the issues that we've had behind that. I don't know, it's still going on now, so you can donate to it if you want to. You can also still take a part of it. It's literally like writing some words on your fingers. I can send you the video if people want to see it, and you can do the gesture and get donations from people to help us stop MS, because it's really important. We want to understand genetics, because like you said, your dad had MS. I've got people that have brothers and sisters that have MS. I've got twins that I speak to that have MS. And we want to understand, how does that work genetically? What does that mean if I have kids? That kind of thing. And if we can stop MS, then we don't ever have to worry about that, because we already know how to cure it. So it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, and with that, so as said, yeah, all the links to all these things will be in the show notes. And one of the links I would say, definitely check out Roxy's Twitter feed, because she has a very, very good, if you're interested in MS, you're interested in accessibility and fashion as well. So with all the pictures where you're looking good, which is good, definitely my ones are less looking good. But yeah, check out Multiple Sclerosis Fashionista, but we'll put links for all that stuff. So thank you very much for joining us, Roxy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find useful links and bonus information there. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org, or you can reach out to Geoff on Twitter @JeoffAlex. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time for tips on living a full and happy life with MS.